Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Also, excuse my voice because I am still trying to recover from the flu and I'm losing it, but I feel fine. So we're going to push through it. And also, this is the last episode for the Demand Gen Made Simple podcast for 2022. So I just want to give you guys a heads up here of when to expect us back. But for today, I'm really, really excited because we're going to dive into a lot of attribution questions and solving how to report demand gen to executives and understanding that buyer's journey. And so as my special guest today, I have Ellen Schwartze, who is a senior director of demand gen over at Knotch. Ellen, how you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Hi, hi, Janelle. It's great to be here. I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, do you want to give the audience just a background of Knotch, who you are, what you do, who you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So Knotch is a software as a service platform. It is helping marketers understand and solve complex journeys by really uncovering what's going on in the middle of the journey. So what we're able to do is allow you to see and compare full journeys to understand truly like the answer to that question that everybody hates, which is what is actually driving conversions.
Yes, and when Ellen and I first did our podcast kickoff meet and greet, and for me to get a better understanding of Notch and the platform, I was really excited, like as a demand gen marketer, to be totally honest with you all, because
Yay!
I was challenged with when I was in house, what is marketing actually doing? How is this working?
Mhm.
How many leads is this going to get? And so I'm on a journey and on a mission to modernize like what demand gen actually looks like. And I think Notch pairs really well with that mission. So that's why I'm excited to have you on today's show. And I think we're
Well,
going to get into
thanks.
a lot of stuff today. Yes,
Thanks so
absolutely.
much. Well, I will say that I have a similar discovery path to Notch to where I was a fangirl a little bit longer than I've worked here. So just a little bit real quick about my background because I know you asked and I forgot to answer that. I came up through the ranks. I actually started my career in nonprofit marketing, and then part of a move to London was finding literally any job and found my way into B2B SaaS. So I worked in the customer experience industry for about 6 years and then made the leap over here into Notch. So back kind of a jack of all trades background when it comes to what I was actually doing, and then have slowly slid into demand gen just kind of based on my experience in virtual events, podcasts, and now I am over here at Notch doing all of our demand gen stuff. So exciting times.
Yeah, I always love hearing about people's journey because you either stumble into marketing or you start and
Mhm,
you're full head, into marketing. So it's always nice to
totally.
better understand that. So let's get started because I know we have a long list of questions that we want to talk about today. And I totally hyped this up on LinkedIn yesterday with my poll asking
Mhm,
about, I asked other demand gen marketers what their biggest challenges when it comes to measuring and talking about demand gen and reporting that back to executives. So
yes.
as a fellow demand gen marketer, there's all this talk, right, about dark social. And
Yeah.
in general, from a foundational standpoint, marketing and demand gen, we function strongly on the use case of dark social. But executives, and especially those who have been in business a little bit longer, who perhaps have more of an outdated mindset of lead gen and not necessarily demand gen, they can't really
Mhm.
grasp the idea of dark social very well. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think especially now that it's kind of been coined as dark social, it's been happening all the like forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
That people go and share something and that's I mean sometimes the best way to get your brand out there. It's a really good sense of it's a really good way that someone is referring you, right? It's nice to know that someone's actually recommending your services, but it's really, really hard to track. And I think if you're an exec, and I think especially in marketing, you've really made your name on understanding exactly what your audience, who your audience is, and what they're trying to do, and how they're here to interact with your brand or what you're solving for. So, dark social is really, really annoying because you can't track it, but it's also exactly how humans interact. So, if you're trying to narrow in on all these different ways that people are sharing it, it's really hard to do. So, it's kind of the same reason I think that those like the brand teams, lots of top of funnel people, you get really frustrated because there's no direct line of attribution from your work to revenue because there's so many steps in between. So we've been able to rely a lot on a lot of gut feel. I think if you're a marketer, you've been around, 5 or more years, it's just a bit of like, I kind of just know this is going to work, or I've seen this work before, but the analytics haven't been there to help you really prove it. but that's also changed a lot in the last 5 years. So there's just ways that you need to be able to show that you're moving the needle. So as far as like an exec not loving dark social, I get it, but not necessarily something we can rely on anymore.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll add here too, one way to better advocate for dark social is to do a lot of customer insights and to better
Mm.
understand how your best customers have found you, have wanted to buy from you, learn from you, advocate from you, and use that to paint that story back to the execs as well. Because you're saying, hey, this
Mm.
logo means so much to you and for the business and for revenue that they heard us through the podcast, or they are very active in Slack communities. That's how they found us. That's why it matters. And you kind of like use that weapon against them and you use it to
Yeah.
support your work, right? And so just not only leveraging your gut, your experience, but then also going back and doing that customer research and seeing your best customers, how they found you, and using that for an investment for marketing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, I think we're going to talk about this a little later too, but that self-reported attribution, I think that
Mhm.
can be important where it's the thing that they're remembering best. It's the most memorable piece of whatever their journey was, is like, well, this is what I remember. This is why I know about your brand, even if you had a lot of things kind of hanging out at the beginning or hanging out at the end of that too.
Yeah, and so when we talk about attribution, right, we have tons of attribution software and we have tons of different models, first touch, last touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really loved learning about Notch was your guys' capability to be a little bit different. And so, yes, I feel like you guys are an attribution software, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys go about it in a different way that supports demand gen marketers. So do you want to talk to me and the audience more about what makes Notch specifically different than just any other attribution software?
Sure. So we're not calling ourselves attribution software because it is a bit more robust than that. So we're creating a category, I think, more of customer journey analytics, to where you need to
Mhm.
understand the full journey, no matter what it's attributed to. You need to understand all of these different interactions and what they lead to, more so than attribution. So I'm a fan of attribution. Like, it's something that every demand gen, every marketer needs to be doing. And I'm not trying to knock on all of the other great software that's out there.
Yeah, me
It's
either, to
solutions to,
clarify.
yeah, it's like, just to be clear, like there are some really good solutions. I think they're just not showing the whole picture a lot of times. So the difference, especially with Notch, is that we're able to show the full journey from first touch to last touch, and that includes the middle touches. So my frustration as a marketer previously was I could really see when someone downloaded a white paper, right? Like, here are my 100 people who said, yes, I want that report. I couldn't see anything leading to that beforehand. So I maybe would have captured their source. If your CRM is set up really well, you could see like their very first touch was a LinkedIn ad, whatever that might be. And then the thing that got them really to talk to a salesperson was this very last step. But I was doing all kinds of stuff in between. I was doing webinars, I was writing blogs, I was sending out email nurture campaigns. And I knew that that person had been in those, but I couldn't see what the final straw was that made them say, yes, that's the right report, whatever that might be. Yes, I'll give you my information, right? So being able to see that and have it be completely agnostic from any other attribution models has been really important for me as I'm using Notch. So that's the meat of it. I'll also just say that my feelings on attribution models is that they're really still based in guesswork and assumptions. They're really prone to human error or human ego, because you're still manually assigning what you think is the right steps, or the right weight, if you will. So like, you've got the U-shaped, where that's, another way of saying first and last touch gets lots of credit. W, where you've got something in the middle, gets a little bit of extra space, or weight. But to me, like, I just think back to where it's like, if I'm the person owning that particular piece of software and I love my webinars, hey, look, this webinar, if you if you attended this one, 50% of the revenue is attributed back to my webinar, so that I can keep doing them, right? So it's all just it's still very nebulous, and it's still very not ambitious. What's that other word?
Ambiguous.
Ambiguous. Yeah.
Oh, I got it.
Woo, we did it. Maybe it's ambitious if I'm just like a marketing, marketing specialist and I'm sitting here saying, yeah,
Words are
dudes,
hard.
words are hard. But it's all just kind of open to interpretation, right? To where you can start to fuss with the numbers and make it look like you want it to look. Whereas what Notch is doing is saying, nope, this is the exact path that someone took from beginning to end. You need to start honing in on this particular piece of content, or kind of the flip side of that. This particular piece of content is showing up in 50% of your completed conversion journeys. What is it about this piece that is really making it click for your audience?
I think a big call out here too, when we were talking about this, we were talking about how you guys can pick up like somebody actually listening to a podcast, or to your point, like LinkedIn ads. So this is more than
Yeah.
just that point of conversion tracking, like a HubSpot or any other attribution, right? Like you guys are able to also associate that from some of the other touch points that they did prior to converting. So I want to call that out for the audience too, because that's important
Yeah.
as a demand gen marketer to not only say, like, hey, have you ever been asked how LinkedIn is performing? Especially if you're doing a true like LinkedIn demand gen
Yeah.
strategy and you're not doing like a one-to-one lead gen form, like you
Right.
probably get asked that question a crazy amount of times. This is a really great, in my opinion, solution to help better see those touch points and advocate
Yeah.
for the marketing dollars to justify behind that, as you can kind of map that for the audience journey and that customer insights.
Yeah. And to take that thought just a little further, think about, even if you have great LinkedIn metrics, how many ways do you have to caveat that? How many ways do you have to kind of crunch the numbers to make it make sense for your revenue team? Or how many times do you have to go to bat and say, yes, it's impressions, but these are important, or I got it right? What we're able to do is say, okay, yeah, from that one LinkedIn ad, you drove this many conversions, like it showed up in this many places. So
Mm-hmm.
and then that allows you to talk to your rev team in words that they understand, to say, nope, it is actually like we handed you off this many people. You should always take that a step further and make sure you're not just handing people who convert, Joe Schmo from Acme Anvil Company. But, like from the very beginning, as long as you're getting the right people through, you can start to really fine tune that and say, again, just in words and phrases that your rev team wants to hear, this was real business that this LinkedIn ad drove.
And I think as a demand gen marketer, fine tuning your skills and your channels is important as well, right? And so
Oh,
being
yeah.
able to really, in the middle of a recession, as everybody is like strapping back some budgets, or even marketers are being laid off, they're pressed to show these type of results, and they're pressed to figure out how to really prove efficiency with either less budget or the same amount of budget. So these insights really help, like justify not only like marketing's investment, right? But like just as a demand gen marketer itself, like putting yourself in your own shoes and just saying, how can I make the best out of this channel? What's working, what's not working? And you have to know that first before you can take that to your marketing leader or your exec team and even ask for a change or a difference. And so being able to
Totally.
really, go back on your gut and your hunch and your insights to leverage that into support as we go into these harder months as a marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best ways to think about this is if you're able to show that, say you have $20,000 that you're spending somewhere, that $10,000 of it was campaign A and 10,000 is campaign B. Campaign B starts showing up everywhere else. That's a really strong case to say we actually need to take some of campaign A's money and funnel it into campaign B. It's working better, more efficiently, like you said. That's got ROI right there, to where it's something you can say, if we take 5K and put it over here, I would expect to see this many more conversions. That's money.
And money is what matters to execs, time and money.
It's really what matters to execs. Yeah. And to your rev team, right? Like I always just think of like anytime I've taken those really, really top of funnel metrics back to like a quota carrying team member, and they're just like, it's great, Ellen. Thanks for your hopes and dreams. I'm going to go sell some actual software now. Thank you.
Yeah, you were labeled as the fluffy marketer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. What a you cut right to my core there, Janelle.
And demand gen marketers, we're not fluff. We have to know the art and the
Right.
science, right? And so yeah, to your point, it hits the heart. It goes down to the core. We're not just
Yeah.
fluff. We try really, really hard to justify results and to bring everything back together into this larger story.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I know is popular right now, especially for demand gen marketers, is having that self-reported attribution field on like high converting forms, like for example, like a demo form, right? Or a contact us form.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that you guys are doing that as well over at Knotch. And so
Mhm.
with your guys' platform, talk to me more about how you leverage those insights that you get, because it's just a recap for the audience. It's a required field on the form,
Mhm.
right? But it's free text. And so they can input
Yeah.
anything that they want. And that's what we want. We want it to be free text. And so how do you leverage those insights based on what your software can do as you pull in the rest of the journey? Do you map that into your
Mhm.
software? Do you just use that, just for coins and nickels, or talk to me more about how that works?
Coins and nickels, I like that. It's a bit of checks and balances, right? So we think that that's a really important field. That's why it's there. I've talked to other demand gen marketers who have actually said we don't put anything on the form other than exactly what you need to reduce friction.
Mhm.
But we do think it's an important way to just kind of get some of the work that we're doing surfaced up to the rest of our team. It's really powerful for our managers, for VPs, for even our CEO to see LinkedIn show up on a form. Like we've got a really great LinkedIn manager. Shout out to Matt Cross. If anybody wants to go follow him, he's dropping lots of really cool information over on his LinkedIn platform. Sometimes his name will actually show up in there. So it's like, oh, I saw Matt
Mhm.
talking about it. And like, that's really powerful then for Matt to be able to say, what I'm doing is resonating. What it might not be doing still is driving a conversion, right? So what we do then is check it against the Knotch data to see how much of our LinkedIn, and we do track LinkedIn organic as much as we do paid. So if that's starting to show up in our source data on any of the journeys that wind up leading to a conversion. So it's always good. I mean, data is data. I do think that self-reported is really prone to people's fallible memories. It's a bit like, I don't know if anybody took like an intro to psychology course, but like what is it about if you've seen a car crash and you try to tell them what color the car was, 50% of these eyewitnesses don't get it right in their memory. It's like the car was red. Ooh, that's a bright silver pickup truck, not a red sedan, whatever it is. And again, I think I said this earlier, but it's like, it's still important because that's what made an impact on this person who's come to your website and said, raise their hand to say, yes, I want to talk to you about this. But it doesn't necessarily get it exactly right as far as what was working ahead of that spot.
And I don't think we'll ever be able to get it exactly right. Like that's part of the
Nah.
beauty of dark social too, which is what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. Like marketing is very much an art and a science. And it's very much, I like to call it like space. You're in a little bit of the unknown, right? And like as things
Yeah.
come down from space to Earth, we can start grasping a little bit of the pieces and putting it back together. But there's always going to be bits and pieces that are just a little bit too abstract for people. And that's okay, because that's marketing. But it
Mm-hmm.
also is the hardest part of the job when you have people like executives that are so tactical and tangible with needing to have the numbers in front of them. And so with that LinkedIn poll that I did actually yesterday, and we're filming
Yeah.
this on December 15th, I asked what the biggest challenges was when it comes to measuring and reporting and telling the story on demand gen. And pretty much like almost all of them, I think I had like 4 votes otherwise, but the majority of them said how to paint that story to executives. So
Mm-hmm.
as director of demand gen, how do you take your findings from what you see on the self-reported attribution field and the information you see from Notch and use that to paint the story? And what advice do you have for other demand gen marketers on the best way to advocate for their work?
Sure. So I'm a huge advocate for communication as much as possible. Part of that is knowing what is important for your exec to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, what they're going to want to hear is how you are moving the needle on broader business outcomes that don't stop at marketing. They need to see, everybody needs the company to make money, but you're likely going to have, 2 or 3, I've heard them called North Star metrics or guiding
Mm-hmm.
stars or something that's like we have 3 big overarching goals that the company has as a whole for this year, fiscal year, quarter, whatever it might be. The more and more you can ladder up to those goals and then build backwards to say, this is, is it marketing? This is, yes, it is. We're working hard because if we can show ABC, it ladders up to, hitting our numbers or creating culture, whatever it might be. Like there are some things that aren't money that are really good ROI that I want to kind of toss out there too. So, speaking in a language they understand is always step one. And I think that's what we wind up doing more and more when you start to tie it to revenue. So when you start to say, driving, I'm driving a demo. I had, 7 people off of a certain pathway convert and book an agent, whatever it is, it's saying this leads then to blah, blah, blah. So that's step 1. And then step 2 is painting the picture in a way that makes a lot of sense to what you're trying to do. Said another way, only give them what they need to hear. So, kind of keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Don't like do yourself a disservice by starting out saying, we got 1 million impressions. Oh, by the way, but don't worry about that. Like, no. That's not the real story. If that's not the real story, then say, don't worry about it. Just say, here's what the results were, and here's what we need to do it again. So that's it. It's like, I love using Knotch mainly because I can see like the pipeline velocity. So one of the metrics that we can use is to say, if they are able to see, if they wind up interacting with content A, then it only takes them 6 days to convert, versus if they don't see content A, it's taking them 36 days. If I'm able to say, well, 36 down to 6, that's a 6x increase. Theoretically, I can be getting 6 of these in the same time as 1 of these. That's big. That's driving business. That's saying we're trying to figure out how to make something better. It could be that, or it could be like, successful journeys always see this, whatever that might be. But I think there's tons of ways to do this without Knotch. Again, just because we are able to use it is great. But there are other ways that you can incrementally show that you're moving the needle forward. And I think we get really stuck because executives are really comfortable with first touch, last touch, or they're really comfortable with what drove revenue with those numbers. They want you to tie it to that. And I think one of the things we can start to do is change a little bit of that conversation to say, we're showing forward progress. I had a great conversation. There's a demand gen guy over at Transfix. His name's Blake Strozik, and he and I did a podcast about kind of all these different pitfalls when you're setting up a demand generation program. One of the things he really recommends is setting up your year over year metrics to show like, we improved, we did X better, we saw more of these things, or we're doing it faster. So finding the right people who can help you map those metrics and show that forward progress, but also breaking that process down into stages so that you can see, we got, some progress to get people from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. Because I think a lot of times people want stage 0 to be a LinkedIn ad and stage 11 to be that opportunity creation, but you don't have the tools to find, or you haven't mapped it out to see what steps 6, 7, 8 are. The data's there. You just have to kind of dig for it, and you can find ways to like really show that you're making progress.
Yeah, and we were outlining this just for the audience. We were outlining kind of these questions and the thought process for this podcast episode yesterday. And so I was really thinking about this answer for myself yesterday, again, with that LinkedIn poll, right? 'Cause what I want to do is help answer these questions for the demand gen listeners as well. And so I mapped out kind of my opinion for that as well. And I agree with what you're saying. And I think the biggest call out, the biggest takeaway that I'll reemphasize for the audience is only make it what's relevant to the executive. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Like, they don't need the whole story. They just need to know the what and the why, and like, period. But the biggest thing when I evaluate how I've communicated the demand gen story to executives, there's 2 things that I find that are the most important. The first 2 are time and money. And so figuring out a way, to your point with revenue, trying to figure out what's the revenue and the money that's associated with it. And then the time you mentioned, like, sometimes they convert 6 versus 36 days. Like, that's a really big time difference. And so a lot of demand gen marketers are using that how did you hear about us self-reported attribution field, right, on their forms. So at a high level, what you can do is you can report this high level to the executives. And so you map out your how did you hear about us data and find a way to tie that to a contact in Salesforce if you're using Salesforce, and that is the primary contact owner for the opportunity, right? So you can map that directly to the opportunity. From there, you can pull the sales cycle, right? And you can start understanding what you're hearing from those dark social self-report attribution fields versus, for example, a cold outbound. Like, especially if you're pressured between marketing and sales and you're still in that, competitive era, you can use that velocity and that sales cycle between marketing's initiatives. And it's not only a piece of content versus 6 versus 36 days. Now it's marketing as a whole, right? versus outbound as a whole. And we can start justifying why investing in marketing at a larger percentage is needed, i.e., especially in time of a recession, right?
Right.
And you can pull those findings and you can actually put it in a pivot table inside of Excel. And you can just take those numbers right then and there. Again, they don't need all the dirty work in the back end and
Right.
everything you had to do to get there. They just need the
As much
numbers.
as you want to brag about it, just
Yeah.
leave it
Just leave it
behind.
alone. Sorry. You could pat yourself on the back and you could tell all your fellow marketers, but your executives leave that at home. So you'll take those numbers and you'll take that to your executives. And then, for example, if your podcast is one of the ones that you're seeing the most of, again, excuse me, guys, because I'm still sick. You can start saying, we need to invest more in our podcast because deals close 3 times faster when somebody has heard of the podcast or is an advocate of the
Totally.
podcast versus somebody who's never heard of us to begin with as a brand. That's how you frame the story. You bring it with numbers, you bring it associated with revenue. Again, do your work and then showcase the highlighted numbers, but you show them in the 2 ways that matter, which is time and money. How quickly can we get more opportunities that actually matter and turn into close won revenue? That's the story for demand gen marketers.
Yeah. And what I love about what you just said is that it includes a bit of the what next. So you've taken
Yes.
these numbers to your team, and the what next was, we can promote the podcast and see some results. We can blah and see la. And I think what that can also help demand gen marketers do is, if you got an idea of what you want to do next, or if you, for example, using the example you said, is like, we need an extra 2 weeks in between there to send out a nurture campaign that has A, B, C pieces to make sure they see them before you then reach out. So making, like, you can start to really hone your processes based on the right piece of content, the right, cadence, the right, whatever it is that you're seeing in this data. So that's what I really like, that you had kind of a bit of the so what in there.
Yeah, the so what also is very important. That's a really good call out as well. So I've loved this conversation. I know we're coming close to time. Is there anything else that you want to ask or to showcase for the audience before we wrap up?
No, I loved what you had put out on LinkedIn about just kind of getting that feedback from the audience. And I think it's something that I think, just to kind of give people a little boost of confidence, it's hard to do, to take all of this back up the chain. The more that you are disciplined, the more that you come to the table with data that they care about, the more seriously you're going to be taken as a marketer. So I think it's something that, I mean, obviously we are both demand gen marketers. We love the data. We love showing what's going on. I think that's going to be really important for any flavor of marketer as we go forward, especially as we head into the recession. We're just going to be asked to do more with less, and you need to be ready to answer that question. Or if not, you need to be ready to have your budget cut, because they're going to look at you and, yeah, like you said, you're going to be a fluff marketer. We can't have fluff right now. So
Yeah.
I think you nailed it.
That's a really great call out. One thing I'll add to that is, if you're a new position in demand gen, or you don't feel like you have enough experience to know what executives care about and talk about, and you're wanting to get a little bit more exposure to that, find somebody who does and make a relationship with them and ask them to glance over your deck that you put together.
Yeah.
Like, you do the work and you share it with somebody else and have them guide you and nitpick you and be totally open to their feedback, right? And then that's how you learn. And then you can ask for that opportunity to pitch it, and you could totally get ripped apart. I'll be honest with you. One time I got totally ripped apart, and my CMO came to me afterwards and was like, Janelle, nobody cares about that. Get to the point. Because I didn't do that background work of having somebody pulse check it. So, don't be afraid. This is how you learn. And so I'll just add that to somebody. That's how I learned. That's how I was able to kind of give this feedback too, because I was able to get that challenge in front of executives and tell them, as a head of demand gen, what demand gen is doing, where we're spending this money, what we're getting out of it. It was highly intimidating, right? But it's how I learned. It's how I was able to take those findings and take the next step. So don't be afraid to ask, get that feedback. And then if you do get that opportunity to go directly to the executives, like, listen and learn. And use
I
that
love
to
that.
just be better. So all my
I
fellow
love that.
demand gen marketers, there you go.
Yeah. Love it. I would say too, I would expect, listening to your podcast, you can get lots and lots of insights. And we have a podcast too, where I talk to other demand gen marketers. And I feel like I learned a ton just listening to them. A lot of the insights that I just spouted off came from conversations I had there too. So there are resources. I think people are always excited to connect on LinkedIn too, if you don't feel like you've got someone within your organization who kind of gets it. So
100%. And I'll throw that back at your guys' podcast too. When I first listened, when you and I were doing our discoveries, like I nerded out. I'll be straightforward. So anybody listening to this right now, go listen to their podcast over at Knotch because like
Yay!
that's crazy. It's called Pros and Content. So that said, Helen, where can people find
Thanks.
you? Where can they learn more about Knotch?
For sure. So I am on LinkedIn. It's my name, which has lots of letters in it. So Ellen Schwartz with an E at the end. You can also find Knotch spelled with a K because, startups got to have a funky spelling. So Knotch. We love connecting with other marketers. Find us there and you'll find something I think that makes sense for you.
And go listen to their podcast. So
and go listen to my podcast. I did pour a lot of hard work into that, but it was really, really cool to just kind of nerd out with some people. We talked about podcasts, we talked about demos, we talked about, connecting everything full funnel. It was really, really cool. So
yeah,
we'll have you on next.
So much. Oh yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me and nerding out with me on Demand Gen, fellow Demand Gen marketer. That is all that we have for today's episode. So thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle.